This is a 3-inch foam ball. We're going to measure it in centimeters to find the circumference. And it's approximately, if we get it over further, we'll calculate it, it should be 23 centimeters and a half. And since I'm on a skew, I'm going to call it 23 and a half centimeters. So I have a 3-inch bulb, which equals 23.5 centimeter circumference. Now I want to divide this by 15, and I'm going to have one slice that's the smallest, and then we're going to double the next slice. So we'll have 5 small slices and then 5 larger slices. So 23.5 divided by 15 is approximately 1.566 centimeters. So one slice will be that, approximately. We're going to have to eyeball that 1.567. And then 2 slice combination will be about 3.132 centimeters. And we're just going to mark them on the circumference. Now trying to eyeball 1.56. Well, it's not an exact science, but we will mark each 1.56. Yeah, it's about right. Well, if they don't come exactly, the last one come exactly to 1.56, you can fudge some of the other slices. You're not going to notice it once the fabric is on. If you accidentally mark one that's not in the right place, it's no big deal. You can always make a line to the correct one. Or scribble out the other one. And as you can see, the last one is slightly off. So what we could do is just kind of eyeball the in-between. You're not going to notice it. Here we're going to find a center, which is going to be, well, we can start at the end. We're going to have to get it really towards the center. If it's off a little bit, that's okay. And then we're just going to mark a line. The best we can. Let's roll this to the center here. This happens to be the center of the end. It's not always perfect, but when you cut it, you can straighten it out. And let's say we're going to do the first one, the small slice. And maybe I'm just going to do the top and then I'll do the bottom later. And the second slice will be double that. And the next slice will be the small slice. And the second slice, etc., etc. And now we will do the other end. one wasn't quite as straight. And we can just scribble this one out. And here we have drawn out, you'll see there's 5 small ones and the 5 big ones. The fact that they're not quite centered here doesn't matter because we're going to cover that with some kind of embellishment on both sides. And now we're going to just kind of file off some of the high ridges and the bumps. Some of these, depending on the fabric, can actually be seen through the fabric unless you add padding underneath. So if you're not going to add padding, it's a good idea to take the ridges and bumps out. This also includes dents. If there are dents, and lots of them, I would suggest using a batting under all of them. Otherwise it will transfer through, depending on the fabric. Now it's time to cut each line. You need a really sharp X-Acto knife to do this. These are hard foam balls, not the soft crinkly kind. But I really prefer, instead of using this, because it is hard on your hands, and I don't get a deep and wide enough cut. But you could use it. I've done both. I do like using a hot knife. And we'll see if it's warm enough for it. This gets a really deep and kind of a widened seam that is really easy to find when you're trying to tuck things in, which gives it a clean, crisp edge sometimes, and you don't need to put banding or embellishments on each crease. It can get quite nice if you have the right thickness of your cut and depth. Now it's getting hot enough that it's just going to cut nicely. You may want to have a fan on or some ventilation as well, as this is melting foam. You might notice that some gets very wide, but with fabric, especially if you have batting, you will never notice the width. I'm going to redo the first one since it wasn't hot enough. And I wanted to redo the one that I cut with a knife. And it's all done. So this is the fabric I've chose to use. Both bought at Joann's. It's a nice metallic, flowery cotton, and some very thin liner material. I'm also using ultra-fine polyester that I got at Hobby Lobby, and we'll use that for this fabric to bat behind that. I'm going to use some Dollar Tree craft glue just to hold down the batting. And just so that it doesn't move around a whole lot. And then we'll apply some batting to it, cut it out. Since the grooves are pretty deep, you can just use a scissors. I'll find it pretty easily and just follow the groove. I'll reposition a little bit. This stuff is pretty forgiving. You can stretch it a little. So if it's not exactly cut, it's okay. I just want to get just a little bit of padding. We're not going to be tucking that into the grooves at all. Now I'm going to orient the flowers all up in a certain orientation, so this will always be up like this. And then I got this tool, which is one of my favorite tools. It's got a sharp edge on one, in case you want to grab a really tiny corner, and then a more deep, smoother side to the other one. And I just start tucking it in the best I can. This might take a little practice to get it right the first time. And you can move it around. If you don't like it, you can pull it off and try it again. Or if you think that like this tuffing is not quite right, then we'll just try doing it again until it feels right. Sometimes you have to go back and forth so as not to get too many darts or too much fabric on one side as opposed to the other. And sometimes you got to pull it out and retry it. Yeah, this is a more thicker cotton and it's kind of more difficult to work with. Once you get the hang of it, it should go in just fine. I don't mind it that it's kind of loose in the crevice, because when you add the one next to it, it'll be tightened up. And I'm just going to take a scissors, as close as I can without cutting the other side. Sometimes I pull this out, cut it off a little bit, add a taper, since there's a lot of fabric at that end. And here I can use the sharper edge to get more of a tight groove, or use the thicker side. So then, sometimes you do need that little sharp edge. Get that put in there. And I'll show you what to do with some of those wrinkles that we have showing up when I'm done. We have a straggler here. We're gonna pull that off. Now on this particular ball, because of the kind of fabric I'm using, one's very thick and one's very thin, we're going to be using a binding on all the creases. Now to get something out like this, I just want to pull it maybe back and forth so we get more of a smooth edging. Of course, when you put the one next to it, that you can also do it then. I do like to have a deep set. So that's the first one. That one, once we get the binding on it, it'll look pretty nice. I eventually made a pattern to cut the batting out for each individual section. Made it a lot easier. So I will just do the gold part now. I did find it easier to use a pin to at least hold the beginning of it and the end of it. Helps it from sliding around as much as well. Although it's still slippery. I notice if you do a few slices along the ways, makes it kind of easier to tuck in without it pulling more of the other fabric out. The cording will cover up any flaws within the creases. There's the first two sections done. Really learned a lot on this one. If it's real slippery, it's got to be really wide, and you gotta cut the edges to get them in there. So now I'm gonna look for cording. Here I'm adding fabric glue to start the cording. I also use a lighter to seal the ends of the cording so they don't fray. I simply stick it in very deeply, pull it tight, stick it into the other end. Here I am measuring to make points 1/3 the way throughout the bulb on the gold so that I could indent it slightly so that the beading that I pin on doesn't stick out too far. Here I'm adding a simple bead to a gold headed pin and adding just a little bit of hot glue to keep it stable. Here I'm using some bronze acrylic paint to paint the flowerets that are put on the ends. I'm adding a little brass acrylic to the tassel for highlights. I will also be painting one of the beads to match. Here I am assembling the ends with the bead and the painted embellishments, as well as a cord for hanging. Here is the completed ornament. Well, here's another 15 divided 3-inch bulb. I'm still reusing this one, and then I'm going to use a brown velveteen and beading around the crevices instead of cording. I think it'll turn out pretty nice. Putting batting under all of the sections. And I'm going to embellish it with some beads instead of cording. I think that will look pretty good. And here's the completed ornament. Added embellishments on the bottom. I didn't have to paint these. Using a gold 3-inch lapel pin. And then an eye pin on top with just some yellow and gold beads, and a flower stem. And here's the completed Christmas ornament.